Hello, class. In this video, we're going to draw a sky in Photoshop. Now, while there might actually be better ways to add a sky into an architectural drawing, this assignment is really about practicing basic Photoshop tools, and we'll be looking at other ways to draw skies in future assignments. Now, up on screen, I've chosen to start with the sky for this assignment. The drawing you see is a drawing that I will have provided you in class. I modeled it in SketchUp and I just exported some lines and some shadows. So you'll have to go and download that and then open it up in Photoshop to get started. And actually, before I even get into the sky, there's a few things I'll have to do to the layers just to prepare this drawing. You'll notice that it comes in as a background layer over here. That means we can't edit it. We are going to have to do a few things with this. So it's not too much of a problem. We'll get going. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to make a new layer for my sky. So I'm just going to come down here and click on the new layer button. It comes up as layer 1, but if I double click on it, I can just call it sky. And what I'll do is I'll then hit the lock button under this layer, and we can see it changes from background to layer 0. Of course, this is our building, so I'll just relabel this building. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this above the sky layer. And I have to do one thing. This is a really great thing in Photoshop and any Adobe software. If I come up to the transparency blend modes, and if I come up here and I go to multiply, we'll notice that nothing changes on the screen, but what actually happened, what multiply does is it takes everything that's white and makes it transparent. That'll allow me to see all the layers I'm going to make behind it. And everything that's black, not transparent, so I'll still be able to see the lines. And anything in between, like the gray of the shadows, will be a transparency related to that. And as we'll see later on, doing shadows as a transparency is also very valuable. So since many architecture drawings come with black lines on white paper, using the multiply command is a great way to keep the lines. We'll be able to render on multiple layers underneath it. So keep that in mind. But anyway, that was the intro to the assignment. Let's get on to the real core content, which is making a sky here. So I've made a sky, and the first thing I do, I'm going to make a gradient for a sky. It's the most simple way you can make a sky. So basically that means a richer, darker blue at the top and a lighter blue down near the bottom. So I'm going to go to my foreground and background colors here in Photoshop and make one sort of a darker blue. And of course, the sky's never dark. I mean, it can be if it's night, but we're making a daytime one here. And we know that it really, the color even, not too much towards blue, but really more towards cyan is usually a better sky color. And then for the lighter color, I might even pull it even more towards green. Though I'm gonna go very close to white on this case. So I've got my two colors over here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my rectangle marquee, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle towards the top half of my drawing. Now, if you can look closely, there's a horizon line in my drawing about there. I'm going to add grass. I'll cover up the sky later, so we'll get to that. But right now, I don't have to worry about the bottom edge. I just I'm going to put it below the horizon line as marked out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to gradient. Now, gradient for me is going to be just holding down under this bottom tool to access all these other ones. And there's my gradient tool. We can see I go from a darker blue to a lighter blue. I'm going to go on screen and hold and pull up. And I'll hold shift to go perfectly straight. Now, if you'll notice here, I've got a darker blue on the bottom and lighter blue at the top, which means mine is backwards. So it really means I'll just have to redraw that line again. I'm holding shift and pulling down. So that gives me my darker blue at the top and my lighter blue at the bottom. So that's a basic gradient. It's a basic sky. There's probably other things you can do to this, like make clouds, and there's many different ways of making clouds. I've shown some in a variety of techniques, but for this, if I'm only using Photoshop tools, why don't I just give it one way? I'm going to use the cloud render tool, I think, in Photoshop. So what I'm going to do now then is I'm going to make a new layer on top of sky, and I'm going to call this clouds. Not necessarily going to make the most perfect set of clouds you've ever seen, but that's all right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to maintain this darker blue color, but I'm going to change the lighter blue color all the way to white. All right, and I'm going to go to Filter, Render, Clouds. And we can see it puts up these white, sort of white/blue clouds like features, but you notice the scale is completely wrong. Like, yeah, maybe broadly that could be a cloud, but not against the drawing that I have there. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale this way up to make my clouds larger. So I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, Scale, and just make them larger. And actually, clouds do not have to be proportionally scaled usually, but they can be. But you don't necessarily have to worry about that for this assignment. So, however big you think you want your clouds to be, again, the bottom doesn't exactly matter. So I'll make mine pretty large, just like this. And now, right now, we're only seeing the cloud layer. We don't see the original gradient layer below it. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take my opacity. I'm just going to turn this down to a layer that sort of allows me to see the gradient as well. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my blending mode, and I think I want to go to linear burn. Yeah, linear burn looks good. Just so basically that's going to keep the opposite of multiply. It basically keeps a lot of the whites while getting rid of a lot of the other colors. So we can see that I see my gradient in the background, but I still see the white clouds, they go along. And then if you want to go ahead and readjust the transparency to get the clouds to the strength that you want, perfectly fine. Maybe you want to rescale at this point, that also works as well. Now we could look to do a couple more things just to see what interesting things we could happen. So right now my clouds look rather flat, and sometimes that's okay. Sometimes that's what clouds look like. But I'm going to try to put them maybe more in like perspective so they can go deeper into the field, as if they're above us. So let's see what we can do. And for those, I'm going to use more transform tools. Now, I could use perspective, but I'm pretty sure it might be easier for me to use distort in this case to fake a perspective. So we'll go to distort. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull these corners way out to the side, the top left and the top right, just like this. We can see it's also going to make the cloud seem bigger, which is probably not a bad thing. Now, especially for scale purposes, you might not necessarily keep the bottom corners right on the edge of the paper, but you definitely don't want to pull them out as far as the top ones. And so when you've got sort of a perspective-like look and feel, I'm just going to hit Enter, and I'll deselect just to get my clouds looking a bit like they're in perspective. Now, at this point, with only the sky in place, it's a little hard to know if I got the colors just right or if I've got the clouds scaled exactly the way I'm looking to do in the long run. That said, we'll keep working through the drawing, and you can always go back and edit these two layers at any point during the process. That's the great thing about Photoshop, of course, and I encourage you to do so. So thanks for watching, and we'll continue this assignment in the next video.